Ave Luna, Ave Lilitu. Good afternoon to the state legislature. I'm Dame Sister Gwendolyn of the Ordo Sororitatis Satanicae. Today, the order honors the moon, the beginning of the Lunar New Year, and her historical importance to humankind. This feminine-charged holiday belongs to Lilith in just one of her many aspects. She rises as the spring from the underworld of winter, like Inanna Ishtar rescued from the Sumerian hell by her transgender lover. Let this advent of a new lunar year bring illumination, and let it reveal the many dark works men have wrought in the state of Missouri. The darkness is prevalent, though. It is everywhere. It's in this very building, occupying its offices and twisting truths to suit men's needs. It's in the halls and it's on the floor of the House and Senate. It's in the mouths and minds of your colleagues, convincing them to file bills which are specifically designed to cause harm to those with little voice and who are on the margins of our society. It is in the filings of arguments and in rooms holding sham debate, where the only voice the religious theist hears is that imaginary voice they have decided must belong to God, and he is not their God, but instead they hear only the voices of the ego and the id. Luna counts the days. She was our first calendar as humans. Her cycle mirrors the cycle of childbearing women. The cumulative days of her phases became known as months, a word derived from moon. It is in great part Luna which has made our planet habitable. Without her, our days would be as short as a handful of hours. The fantastic and weird creatures of the sea would dominate. There would be no us. No such thing as humanity. Humanity. That word is both a term for our collective and a way of describing how we treat each other. Right now, humanity is in short supply. The evidence lies in the degree to which men have legislated women's bodies from a place of religious pseudo-superiority, a place of ignorance and rage. Theistic religion has always devalued women. This is nothing new. What is new is the faces of today who carry on these traditions of misogyny. Men have ever sought to control women by oppressing all notions of bodily autonomy. Every method to curb her freedom and equal worth has been tried and tested. They have tested the limits of the downtrodden, too. We of the OSS, who have taken up the tape, the thread, and the shears, have watched as the Supreme Court's landmark decision of Roe v. Wade has been eroded by the Missouri State Legislature. It's a pernicious process where each redundant bill, every unreasonable regulation, every committee hearing packed with prayer warriors, they are all meant to eat away at women's bodily autonomy, our women's economic freedoms, our health, our hope, and our opportunities. Just as Luna is a light in darkness, the Ordo Sororitatis Satanicae has vowed to cast a light upon dark doings and attacks on civil rights, and to reveal them. If Luna were personified, if that aspect of Lilith came among us, what would she say? Is there any doubt that she would angrily question why it is that women have less and less of a say over their own bodies, and why are men with little knowledge of her body allowed to dictate even one word governing it? O Luna, who makes the night without fear, whose light reveals the plans of the dastardly, let us act on your behalf. We will be your light in the dark, to expose the persecutor and the architect of persecution. Ave Luna, Ave Lilitu. The moon is waxing, and her light increases. It isn't too late for some of our representatives to accept that light in scrutinizing their darker selves and their anti-woman positions. It isn't too late for some to start over, like the beginning of a new year. There is a long history of systemic oppression which goes beyond women. There is a great and terrible history of discrimination, torture, and death, which belongs to a culprit that has woven its way into much of life's fabric. Organized theistic religions, the bloodiest wars, the cruelest purges, the genocide and decimation of indigenous peoples, most of these can be laid squarely at the feet of organized monotheistic religions. In honor of the moon and her light in the darkness, we will speak today of the horrors living within the memory of our world and of modern persecution. Today, we are your Hypatia, but unlike her, we will not be silenced. We offer as a gift of our service an expansion on the sorrows wrought by men who believed fervently that they were doing the will of their gods. So you will understand the dangers of faith in the supernatural by the terror it has caused throughout the ages. These are lessons of importance, and they are in danger of being forgotten. They are mistakes which we should all have learned from, and yet many have dug in and refused to admit their beliefs caused harm and still do. Let us now look together at the lessons of the past. Ave Luna, Ave Lilitu. Today we remember the crimes and atrocities of Theodosius I. From the year 392 of the Common Era to his death in 395, Theodosius I was the last man to serve as emperor of the entire Roman Empire, both East and West. Though initially tolerant of the pagan religions, he eventually enacted a series of laws which effectively rendered paganism an outlaw religion and illegal, along with other variants of Christianity that had been declared heretical. Theodosius extinguished the sacred flame at the Temple of Vesta, disbanded the Vestal Virgins, and eliminated state support for the pagan temples. Later, he had pagan temples closed and eventually desecrated, destroyed, or converted to Christian use. It is likely that he suppressed the Olympic Games, which were last held in 393 of the Common Era. Today, we also remember Hypatia of Alexandria, woman, philosopher, and educator. In the year 412 of the Common Era, after a bitter battle of succession, Cyril became the bishop of Alexandria in Egypt. In 414, he closed the synagogues in Alexandria, confiscated Jewish property, and expelled the Jews from the city. He soon became embroiled in political struggles with the Roman prefect Orestes, who came close to being murdered by a mob of Christian clerics under Cyril's authority. Orestes took counsel from his close friend Hypatia, a famed mathematician, astronomer, and Neoplatonic philosopher. A pagan herself, she was already wary of Cyril's antics. She was a well-known and popular figure in Alexandria, whom Cyril and his allies sought to discredit. In 415, a Christian mob ambushed her as she rode home in her carriage. They dragged her into a church, stripped her naked, and murdered her using ostraka. These are shards from oyster shells and tiles from roofs. Finally, they dismembered her body and burned the pieces. Adding insult to injury, the church later appropriated her story with the invention of a Christian saint, Catherine of Alexandria. Today, we also remember the Cathars, who were also known as the Albigensians, who were an ascetic Christian sect that originated in Dalmatia and Bulgaria, but became prominent in southern France. In the 11th and 12th centuries, in some ways, their beliefs were a revival of the long-abandoned Gnosticism from the early centuries of the Church. They preached a radical dualism, a perpetual conflict between the evil material world and the pure world of spirit. Their reaction against the corruption of the clergy and their rejection of various Catholic doctrines soon won them the enmity of the Catholic establishment. Unable to win over the Cathars by threats and diplomacy, Pope Innocent III in 1208 declared a crusade against them, offering the lands of these heretics to any French noblemen who could take them. This crusade consumed the region for the next 20 years. Catharism was eventually snuffed out by the middle of the century. The most notorious incident in this blood-soaked campaign was the siege of Béziers, a town of about 20,000 people, including both Cathars and Catholics. In 1209, when the papal forces finally breached the city gates and set about to killing the Cathars, They asked of their commander, Arnaud Amalric, how to distinguish the Cathars from the Catholics. He reportedly replied, "Kill them all. God will know his own." This is the origin of the modern expression, "Kill them all, let God sort them out." The entire population of the town was slaughtered, and its buildings burned to the ground. The crusade against the Cathars has been described as the first ideological genocide. It wound up killing an estimated 1 million people, including many non-Cathars, such as the unfortunate Catholics of Béziers. Not surprisingly, many Cathars went underground to practice their faith in secret. The Inquisition began largely as an effort to ferret out the Cathars. Today also, we remember the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre in France, the third of 3 wars of religion between Catholics and Protestants, which ended in the year 1570. 2 years later, the peace was still fragile. In an attempt to reconcile the religious factions, Catherine de' Medici, the Queen Mother of France, arranged a marriage. Her Catholic daughter, Margaret, to the Protestant prince, Henry of Navarre, later to become Henry IV of France. Many nobles and prominent Protestants arrived in France to attend that wedding. Their presence unnerved the Parisians, most of whom were staunchly Catholic. Tensions were further inflamed by an assassination attempt on one of the Protestant leaders. King Charles IX, probably in league with his mother Catherine, decided on August 23rd to take this opportunity to eliminate many of the Protestant leaders. City authorities closed the gates, armed the citizenry to defend against a Protestant uprising, and the king's Swiss Guard set about their task of killing a list of designated Protestants. Now the built-up tensions exploded in a wave of popular violence. Mobs of Catholics hunted down their Protestant neighbors for slaughter, using chains to block streets and hinder escape. Bodies were thrown into the Seine. Over 1,000 of them later washed ashore downstream. The violence continued for 3 days and spread to other Catholic cities. Bloody as it was, this massacre was but a skirmish in the decades-long carnage between Catholics and Protestants. In England, Catholics persecuted Protestants and Protestants persecuted Catholics as the scepter changed hands. From 1618 to 1648, Central Europe was convulsed by the 30 Years' War, resulting in an estimated 8 million fatalities, not only from military action, but also from violence, famine, and plague. We too remember the way the church shamed women in their natural sexual desires in the famous Inquisition document, the Malleus Maleficarum, also known as the Hammer of Witches. Clergymen were warned, all witchcraft comes from carnal lust, which is in women insatiable. And yet the same book, accusing women of perverse lust, requires these clergymen to strip the accused women naked before mutilating their bodies. It was not the women who were evil in these trials. It was the men who tortured and abused them. We remember today Anne Hutchison. She was a Puritan, just like her fellow colonists, with only one difference in belief from they. She believed in a covenant of grace, like many of our legislators might believe in today. And yet she was cast out of the colony with her children because she did not worship as they did, saying as she left, "You have no power over my body, neither can you do me any harm. Therefore, take heed how you proceed against me." These are very powerful words. We remember too Sarah Good, Sarah Osborne, and Tituba that were falsely accused of witchcraft and punished based on pure delusions. The townfolk of Salem, Massachusetts began turning on all women, all around them, executing the innocent and leaving behind motherless children. We remember today Missouri's own Agnes Smith, who found a mob of men outside her home in the night. She watched as they burned her home to the ground for being Mormon rather than Christian. With her babies in her arms, she waded across a nearby river, barely escaping them. We remember today Mary McLean, who had the audacity to openly speak on her bisexuality and the importance of feminism in her 1901 book, I Await the Devil's Coming. We remember the men that tried to put her back in her place and her courage in standing by her right to speak from a position they could not possibly understand. These are but a few of the lessons of the past which are fading from popular memory. They are the warnings of what theocracy does to society. It is misery and punishment for those who do not follow the same imaginary God as the state. But if men have not learned from the horrors of the past, what kind of modern era do we live in now? I yield now to my fellow Dame Sister, Nikki Mungo, to give voice to the evidence of the present and to illustrate further what the face of true persecution is. Ave Luna, Ave Lilitu.
Here, Gwen. Take this in your book. Your water. Okay. Thank you, Gwen. Good afternoon, legislators. We hope you can hear us from here. Lilituans do not believe suffering is a blessing, as most suffering is brought about by an act of choice, is a product of the will of men in power, and ultimately unnecessary. As Dom Sister Gwen just covered, our history is fraught with persecution, centuries upon centuries of peril, all at the will of a theistic majority. Let us examine this word, persecution. What is persecution? The dictionary defines persecution as a noun, hostility and ill treatment, especially because of race, political, or religious beliefs. Synonyms of persecution are oppression, victimization, maltreatment, ill treatment, mistreatment, abuse, ill usage, discrimination, tyranny, tyrannization, punishment, torment, and torture. How does modern persecution in America compare to our global past now that we've arrived in 2019? While we may now have amenities like electricity, hot water, flushing toilets, and have sent astronauts to the moon, we still have not met the most necessary human need of all, compassion. Though it may be 2019, we remain barbaric echoes of our past. It's simply the torture devices that have changed. Man still inserts his theistic will into the homes of others, their professions, their marriages, into their bodies and minds. Man performs these acts on behalf of the state when they reject LGBTQ protections, ignore the needs of minorities, fail to assist the poor, or intervene between patient and physician. Man should be granted no quarter when abusing their religion to do so. Not in the United States of America and not in Missouri. Who is being persecuted in this decade? Let's take a look at the present. And mind you, this is going to be hard to read through. We remember Dejanay Stanton, the first transgender woman shot and killed this year. She joins the dozens of trans women shot and killed every year in this country for simply being themselves. This is persecution. It would take us all day to detail the violence against just this one segment of our population, and yet our legislature continually tries to remove protections for these women when what they need is a state that can protect them. We remember a woman who, to protect her identity, has gone by the initials KS. We listened as KS revealed her story of the former governor of this great state of Missouri. We listened as she described intimidation and the use of photographs that he threatened to use against her marriage. This is persecution. This is the type of politicians our daughters have to watch gain positions of power. We remember persecutor Preston Q. Howard of Wright City, Missouri, who pled guilty to 3 counts of obstructing persons in the free exercise of religious beliefs after threatening and harassing a mosque in Georgia. This is persecution. We remember the murders of 3 victims who were killed at 2 Jewish community centers the day before Passover after a gunman opened fire in facilities full of children and teens near Kansas City, Missouri. The persecutor was later heard shouting, "Heil Hitler," from the back of the police squad car. This is persecution. We remember persecutor Alan M. Loftus, charged with 3 counts of felony assault motivated by discrimination and 1 count of misdemeanor peace disturbance in Lake of the Ozarks after physically assaulting several victims and calling them homophobic slurs. This is persecution. We remember threats to Mizzou's black student body over social media, on campus, and swastikas drawn in dorm rooms, sparking national attention. This is persecution. We remember an IHOP server in Grandview, Missouri, writing racial slurs on the back of a black teen's receipt. This is persecution. We remember racial slurs painted on a home in Cuba, Missouri, that was later set on fire. This is persecution. We remember black churches in St. Louis having their church doors set on fire. This is persecution. This one. We remember 3 teens from Independence, Missouri, who pointed a gun at a 13-year-old boy, assaulting him and calling him racial slurs. This is persecution. We remember a viral video of Missouri teens, rural Missouri teens, riding around in the back of a pickup truck, and another of Tabitha Duncan, both discussing hunting black citizens for sport. This is persecution. We remember Dee Dee Pearson, a 31-year-old transgender woman who died from bullet wounds in Kansas City, Missouri, a victim of homicidal, homophobic rage. This is persecution. We remember Allie Steinfeld, a 17-year-old transgender girl who was stabbed repeatedly in the genitals. Her eyes were gouged out, and her body was set on fire by her peers. This is persecution. We remember Teron Rio Carson, a gay man who was fatally shot by an assailant as he left a nightclub in Kansas City, Missouri. This is persecution. We remember actor Jussie Smollett, who recently suffered a violent physical attack involving racist and homophobic slurs, punching him in the face, pouring bleach on him, and wrapping a rope around his neck. This is persecution. We remember American clergy calling for the deaths of LGBTQ on videos and to congregants. This is persecution. We remember a 12-year-old transgender girl from Oklahoma who was targeted in an inflammatory social media post by the parents of a classmate, leading to violent threats and driving officials to close their school for 2 days. This minor child, an innocent, was forced to leave the state for her own safety. This is persecution. We remember 9-year-old Jamel Miles of Colorado, who took his own life after classmates bullied him for being gay. When our babies are killing themselves, we must consider this act an indictment upon our society, and more importantly, an indictment upon our legislators who are sworn to protect and to do no harm. This is persecution. We remember Representative Greg Razor, who recently requested LGBTQ workplace protections in this very Missouri Capitol. We will not forget that Missouri legislators voted in favor of religion-based discrimination in We the People's House. This is persecution. We remember the throngs of protesters barring entrance while threatening and antagonizing patients seeking science-based, low-cost, reproductive health care at Missouri medical clinics. We remember the state of Missouri coercing women with medical misinformation and unnecessary, non-scientific, religion-based protocols while spending taxpayer money to legislate our bodies as if chattel. We remember Missouri legislators taking TANF funds meant for hungry children and giving them to Christian evangelicals posing as crisis pregnancy centers. Limiting access to affordable birth control is forced birth. This is persecution. Some of Missouri's religious Christian majority would have you believe it is they who are under attack, subject to religious persecution, when in reality, it is they who are swinging the sword in yet another crusade. We ask for freedom, they demand control. Those currently leading a religious crusade across this nation perceive any refusal to accept their will and dominion as an act of religious persecution against them. Let us be clear. It is not in any way, shape, or form performing an act of religious persecution to resist the religious persecution advances of another. Demanding our civil rights be respected and protected from an aggressor is not the equivalent of persecution. It is the equivalent of fending off unwarranted attacks. The Establishment Clause of the U.S. Constitution states, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. With Missouri legislators citing religious ideology as the basis of their bills and current pro-discriminatory legislation, these elected officials are in fact attempting to establish a religion, specifically their religion. The Establishment Clause allows for legislators to practice their own religion. What the Establishment Clause does not allow for is legislators using their own religion to establish laws constructed to force the will of citizens who do not share their ideology. Laws where, for instance, You could fire an employee for being LGBTQ, then refuse them unemployment benefits, deny them food assistance, never mind if they have children. Perhaps this is in the hopes they will seek work to survive elsewhere in another country or state. Loss of work and home, starvation, forced to flee. Sound familiar? It should. Should the religion of any Missouri lawmaker supersede my own religion? My religion is deeply rooted in bodily autonomy. Yet Missouri legislators believe their own personal religious ideology should be allowed to encroach upon mine through the will of the state. How is this not establishment of a religion, as Missouri reproductive laws grievously encroach upon my own religious ideology? Missouri legislators have laid their claim seizing my body as land grant property of a Christian rule state. I stand before you today persecuted simply because my body contains a uterus and because some Missouri legislators believe their deity instructed them to treat me and others like second-class citizens. Who then are the truly persecuted? Who are the second-class citizens? Who are those deemed unworthy, property, or other? These are the persecuted. They are the poor, the homeless, the hungry, the veterans, the unemployed, the disabled, the minorities, the LGBTQ, the immigrants, and the non-Christian. Child or adult, it makes no matter. These are the persecuted. Though the modern-day persecuted of America, named above, remained maligned as the unworthy and in obvious need of protection, Missouri legislators want you to know they do care very, very much about the fetus in utero. Should Missouri legislators continue to insist their own deity's wishes be adhered to by all Missouri citizens by law, regardless of our own religious personal ideologies or lack thereof, they will need to produce this deity to provide testimony to that effect. We have arrived at the end of the present. We can only guess what the future holds. I will end with an invocation intended for Missouri legislators to provide them guidance, much needed guidance. We ask that you do not bow your heads in submission. We beg that you never submit, to never avert your eyes from the light of truth, from the power of science and knowledge. Instead, we ask you to plant your feet firmly on the ground in resolute rejection of tyranny, to cast your head back on your defiant shoulders, to embrace the metaphorical mother of all rebellion, and vow for our words to penetrate deeply the congested ears of Missouri legislators. Lilith, open the gates. Lilith, let them hear us. Lilith, free their minds of superstition and burn the fear from their hearts. And so we begin. Lilith, mother, strength, compassion, love. We ask that those assembled reflect upon these virtues in benevolent and noble service. we summon the embodiment of her divine inspiration. Guide our legislators in protecting the elderly, the disabled, and in honoring our veterans, to provide shelter and nourishment for all those who have not. Guide them in thought and reason, with a deep respect for the quality and well-being of all. Love is the whole of the law. As these legislators move forward in their work on behalf of all their constituents, may they take every day in that solemn service as a renewed opportunity to reshape and refine their own existence. Let the love and learning our mother represents be the daily bread of any who would serve the people. From the universal mother we came, and back to her we go. May knowledge, reason, and fairness be the path to life, liberty, and happiness. Ave Lilitu. And with that, we have completed our presentation. We thank the Missouri Capitol for approving our permit, and this will be the first of a three-part series. Our next event here on the first floor rotunda is scheduled for 2:28, I believe, and 3:11. So thank you once again. Good day.